It's used colloquially to refer typically to people doing volunteer work. But the meaning is much, much deeper than that, and I'll come to that in the answer. But so he spoke about us doing Seva, and all of those of us who are inclined and wanting to do Seva, and yet how to make sure that the Seva, which is actually a spiritual practice, is pure and is not tainted by the ego. The ego is really, really, really insidious. Because as we get deeper and subtler, so does the ego. It's not a matter of having like weeds in your garden, for example, where if you just get the right shovel, but it would be the equivalent of weeds where you thought that you'd gotten it out, only to discover that actually the root removed the lower level of it, only to discover later on that actually those weren't really the fully correct glasses. You needed better glasses because actually the roots go even deeper. So it's a beautiful and yet not nearly as simplistic subject as it may sound like. On the surface level, it would be easy to say, well, the ego's about the self, Seva's about others, so therefore clearly they don't go together. If you're doing Seva, you're serving others, there shouldn't be any place for ego. But this is where the insidiousness of the ego comes in. And it comes in a wide variety of ways. It comes in, as Pujya Swami Ji always says, in the illusion that I'm the doer. So even though I've done it for someone else, I don't have any benefit in this. I've cooked food to serve others. I haven't even eaten. I've planted trees, the fruits of which will be eaten by others. I've done things where there's no objective benefit. And so you'd say, well, there's no place for the ego, because clearly it's not padding my pocket, bringing me anything. And yet, many of our motivations are much subtler than just financial gain. So what ends up happening is probably one of the first places, or at least a good place to start, is simply the idea that I'm the doer. I'm the one who cooked that food. I'm the one who planted those trees. If it weren't for me, if I didn't get up and go to that garden this day, those trees wouldn't be there, these people wouldn't have fruit. If I hadn't cooked that food, nobody would have food to eat. So it comes in very, very, very subtly, and then it leads to this ego and pride, which of course is what we get into the spiritual practice to remove. And so then we remove, or we try to remove from ourselves the concept of I'm doing, by connecting ourselves with the divine in such a way that it's just the divine's will. And we remind ourselves continuously in a variety of ways, whether through prayer, whether through japa, whether through meditation, whether through introspection, I'm not the doer. But then it goes even more subtle. There should be a reward for my seva. I'm not going to eat this fruit. I'm not going to eat those meals. I'm not going to the school that I've just started. I'm not sending my children to the school. But I should get something out of it, even if it's just love, appreciation, acknowledgement, respect, all of these things. And that's also ego. It's just subtler. And so then
again we relinquish. And again we go back to Krishna telling us about not being attached to the fruits of our labor. And when most of us think about it, we think about it much more in a material world. I've done a certain work, it bears fruit or not, I'm not supposed to be attached to that. But that fruit, again, isn't always material. It's not always, I invested in the stock market, does it pay me dividends? I did a wonderful proposal, does it become a project? It can be, I planted all those trees, and all of these people are now eating apples and oranges, but nobody's loving me for having planted it. Nobody's appreciated me for having planted it. Nobody even knows I'm the one who planted it. And so then again, we have to relinquish that attachment to the fruits, even when the fruits are subtler than material gain. If it's really just service, then it's not about what I get back. And that takes us really into, I think, the deepest level of it, which is, and this is going to be a little bit of a play on words, but I'm going to go there. I'm going to take the risk and go there. I began by saying Seva is about others. And it should be all about service of others and not what we get. And yet, after you've gone through those two levels and you've working to surrender and working to surrender and working to just become really a clear vessel through which God's will flows. So it's not even about what I think should be done. It's just about how clear. It's like, you know, we have heart attacks due to this cholesterol that sticks itself on the inside of our blood vessels. And so when that happens, the diameter gets smaller. When the diameter gets smaller, the pressure rises. When the pressure rises, this is what leads to heart attacks. The solution is to remove that which is on the surface of these blood vessels so that the area increases, therefore the pressure decreases. In the same way, that ego pressure comes by having things built up along that wall of our vessel. And that's where the ego and the expectations and all of that comes in. And even the concept of this is the right way to do Seva, that's the wrong way to do Seva. This is good Seva, that's bad Seva. Feeding people is better than planting trees. Building schools is better than doing that. Any of that is what actually clogs that vessel. So as we surrender this, and this is where we get to the final part that I'm going to take you to just a slightly different level. So we began by saying Seva is all about others. And then at the end, it actually is all about ourselves, but not in the ego sense. It's all about ourselves because ultimately what Seva is spiritual practice. And even the sense that I'm doing it for others has created a separation between me as doer, or even in a better sense, me as vessel through which the act was done, and you as receiver, or you as vessel through which the receiving was done. Nonetheless, that's created a separation between us. And ultimately what Seva is a purification of the self. It's a sadhana. It's not Seva and sadhana, it's Seva as sadhana. And when the Seva is as sadhana, then actually it is all about ourself, but it's all about our spiritual practice. So it's about how can I not just be the performer of this Seva, not just be the one making this food, but also the one eating it. I began by feeling really good about myself because here I was making food that I wasn't even going to eat. food that was only going to feed others, planting trees that were only going to benefit others. But can I then actually come to the realization that I'm both the cook and the eater, and that the one I'm feeding is actually myself? And that loss of separation between us doing the seva, those receiving the seva, and the act of the seva. So I'm also that being prepared, that which I'm preparing to serve. I'm the cook, I'm the eater, I'm the food. Because ultimately it's all about God, and it's all about our connection to God. So seva then becomes simply another way for us to dissolve these boundaries. And when that becomes the aim, then it becomes less about how much, how big, how many. And yet, interestingly, it becomes even bigger because I'm no longer counting. There's no longer any boundaries. This is my sadhana, this is my practice. Because otherwise, regardless of whether we're doing service to others or whether we're running a company that has, child labor in sweatshops, either way, the ego comes in. And then we get afflicted by all of the same games of the ego, all of the desires and attachment and expectations and jealousy and competition and judgment and all of that. And so seva is not just that what we're doing is different, but it's who is doing it is different. Because it's not this. It's something flowing through me to bring me closer to that which is already flowing through me.